Hello and welcome to this Everything's Black and White podcast post-Derby special. I'm Sean McCormick, Newcastle United reporter at the Chronicle. This is Lee Ryder, Chief Newcastle United reporter at the Chronicle. We wish this was a happier podcast, but we're stood in the stadium light just over an hour after full time as Sunderland won the first Wear-Tyne derby in the Premier League for almost 10 years. Won the game 1-0. A Nick Voltemade own goal was the difference between the two sides on the day. Just before we get started, special thanks to our sponsors NordVPN and FPro. You can find full details below with both of those in the comments. Lee, just to begin with then, just your initial thoughts on what was a frustrating and disappointing day for Newcastle United?
Yeah, it was abysmal. I'm not going to stand here and say they were unlucky or anything like that. Sometimes in football you don't get what you deserve. You can create loads of chances, you can hit the post, the goalkeeper could have a world-class afternoon, but Newcastle got what they deserved there today because they did not step up to the plate at all. I mentioned earlier they didn't start the game right. They didn't get those first early challenges in for me, and Sunderland had more desire to win the game, and for me Sunderland understood the fixture better than Newcastle players did, and it was, I think once Dan Burn went off injured, even though he wasn't having the greatest game himself, the little bit of inspiration they had went off the pitch with them, and second half Newcastle just looked lost.
Well, that was it. I think that's the big frustration for Newcastle, was that it wasn't a game that had much quality from either side, but Sunderland just looked like they wanted that little bit more. They looked like they had control of the game a bit more. They looked like they had their emotions in check. They put in some thunderous challenges when they needed to put in some thunderous challenges, but then they also sort of kept it calm. I think it was telling that the only sort of melee was right at the end of the game, and I think you turned to me in the press box and said, "Good, no good doing this in the 90th minute. We need to see this throughout the game," and that's 100%. What Newcastle lacked throughout the game. It was the fight, the desire, and then when they went behind, looked devoid of ideas. And I think that's the biggest frustration for fans. I'm sure you've had fans and friends messaging you after the game, same as I have. Just the ultimate frustration of coming here and not really in a glove on Sunderland.
Absolutely, and as I say, it's about the sense of occasion, and Sunderland will bang up for this day. Their fans were up for it, and at the end of that game, as you would have experienced as well, I thought that stand was actually going to fall down. It was absolutely like rock. I've only experienced that once in football before, when Newcastle won a semi-final in the FA Cup at Old Trafford, where the stand was swaying. I experienced it there again today in a more painful manner, and Newcastle, they weren't ready. They didn't understand the enormity of what this game means to the region and how hungry Sunderland were. Look, even if you come here, you put 10 men behind the ball, you get out of here with a 0-0 draw, and you go to the game at St James's Park in March and you win that, that's fine. But today, you can't walk out here having lost that game, and that's what Newcastle United have done.
And I think, sorry Lee, I think the frustrating thing from the Newcastle point of view as well was that the atmosphere before the game was absolutely electric. Obviously, where the Sunderland press box is, if people don't know, is right at the top of the stand. That's above the dugout. So we had Sunderland fans right in front of us before kick-off, and you could barely hear ourselves think. We could barely hear ourselves talk to each other. It was a cacophony of noise inside the stadium, like as you'd expect it to be on such a big game in the derby. But then, as the game sort of wore on, Sunderland didn't quite get the goal that they probably wanted to get the fans sort of really rocking, and it almost feels like Newcastle missed the opportunity. There's a few times, particularly out wide, where there was good at the interplay, but then Anthony Elanga would misplace a 5-yard pass. I thought he really struggled today, and we'll probably get onto that because that was one of Eddie Howe's big team selections. Same on the left-hand side, Anthony Gordon, Lewis Hall had quite a bit of joy, but the end product was always lacking, and the fact that Newcastle didn't have a shot on target until around the hour mark when Bruno Guimaraes hit one straight at Robin Roos probably tells its own story.
It does, yeah, and just to pick up on a point you made there about when the teams come out at the start, it was so well coordinated. The fact that the Sunderland fans, they all knew what the songs were going to be, the way everyone walked out, the players' game was completely rocking, and it's something that Newcastle can learn from. It's a painful lesson, a very painful lesson, but when Newcastle walk out at St James's, it should be similar. It should be the touch paper being lit, and that's what happened for them today, Sunderland, and it's not happening at St James's, and I think that contributes to the performance because that's something you look at. Going back to what they created, a couple of shots on target. I mean, there weren't anything to write home about. There wasn't anything clear cut. What happened to cutting in, getting it across the face of the goal, and someone being on the end of it, which was seen only the other night in Leverkusen when Miley scored.
Yep.
You know, Gordon was unbelievable in that game in the second half. Today, that was a different player.
Yeah.
A completely different player. But he wasn't the only one. Elanga was poor. You know, Big Nick, you know, the own goal. I have sympathy for anyone who scores an own goal.
Yeah.
You're not meant to be doing
Of course,
that.
yeah.
But again, did he get any service? Can we be too critical on him? I mean, there's lots. You could go around the whole team and pick faults, but overall, the collective was just atrocious.
Yeah, and I think just going the way Newcastle set up in the game, it was probably a surprise to everyone in the press box to see them sort of sit back and try and create traps and catch Sunderland on the counter attack. Actually, you know, it didn't look too bad in the first half when they were overturning the ball. It was then what they did with it when they got it that was the frustrating thing. But I think it took the goal and it took a few substitutions on the hour mark for Newcastle to come in any sort of life, and that's unforgivable in a derby game. And I think that's going to be the biggest frustration of everyone going away from tonight. And Sunderland have had a very good start of the season, but I think they wanted it more. But I don't necessarily think that was a quality Sunderland performance by any means. I think
they won't care.
They managed. What the point they're being is they managed the game well.
Aye.
But Newcastle aren't coming away from that thinking we were thoroughly outplayed there. They just didn't turn up. And
No,
if you're not going to turn up in a place like this, in
Aye.
a Sunderland team who are, you know, have built a head of steam already this season, you're going to get punished, and that's exactly what happened this afternoon.
Yeah, in a defeat like this, it lingers because, you know, Newcastle have got to put up with the stick now until March.
Yeah.
You know, it's has it ruined Christmas? Feels like it at the minute. You know, it feels like it. It's like, you know, throw the burnt turkey in there as well, and you've got the full set almost, losing a derby. But you know, there's a big cup game coming up.
Yeah.
They've got to win that. They've got to win that now. They've got to, you know, get to a semi-final again. But even then, this still hurts. It leaves a bit. It's like a massive scrape on your leg. You know, it's going to take a while to clear up, and I'm really disappointed with it. And Newcastle they've got to look at themselves, because there's obviously a deeper problem here, and if we don't accept that, then we're going to continue getting results like this. Because spend £400 million, you should be coming here and putting up at least a fight. Yeah, you lose games. Sometimes you lose games unluckily, but today they got what they deserved, and it's just a poor show. And Eddie Howe, sorry in the press conference afterwards, but what else can you say?
Well, exactly that. Obviously, you've been in the Eddie Howe's press conference. I was at the mix zone after the game, so I wasn't in Eddie Howe's press conference. You said there he came out in front of the club and apologised. Was he asked any questions about the way that Newcastle set up, his team selection? As we've mentioned there, the big call today was Anthony Elanga on the right wing, and that really backfired. He was poor.
I mean, I thought that was the right call, to be totally honest. He didn't play in Germany. He's fresh. He's on a bit of a mission to show what he can do for Newcastle United, because we haven't seen anything from him yet, really. We've seen next to nothing from him. And he just didn't turn up, you know, and that was a big problem. Going back to the press conference question, I asked Eddie about, you know, the get into them signs that they had on the walls in the dressing room. That's all well and good, putting the sign up, but you've got to go on there and do it. You've got to go there and do it.
Yeah.
You know, they didn't get into them at all. It was, you know, it's all right having the bravado and, you know, taking team pictures and all that, but if you're not going to go on there and live up to, you know, what Sunderland are going to serve up, you're going to be in deep trouble. And unfortunately, Sunderland just were on message today, and they were waiting for an opportunity to get Newcastle back for what happened in the FA Cup, and they did it with the team picture on. I mean, that's been an accident waiting to happen for a lot of weeks now.
Yeah.
All the team pictures, you know, I enjoy it, some of it, but at the end of the day, do you draw a line under it? Because there's other teams who are going to play now who have done that too, and they're going to be desperate to exact some revenge like we've seen today, and that hurt at the end.
Yeah, no, definitely. And just to touch on something you said there, the amount of times we've heard this season a player come out after a difficult defeat, or even on Wednesday in Leverkusen, Anthony Gordon comes out and says it's something to do with mentality. There's a mentality problem that we can't see out games. There's a set piece problem. It's a seeing out games problem that they keep putting down to mentality. Is this sort of the biggest example of what you're saying there? There's something seriously wrong. This Newcastle team have been known for their mentality and you know, that being such a big strength for so long now. But this season they've looked shaky in a number of games, and they haven't quite been able to piece together good performances for 90 minutes, barring maybe Everton the other week when they won 4-1. But this is now 4 months into the season. It's a deep-rooted thing. It is the mentality a problem, because if the players keep saying it, they obviously think it is.
Look, we just listened to the CEO the other week, David Hopkinson, talk about they want every department to be world class.
Yeah.
They want to go on like a world class football club. Well, I'm sorry, but a world class football club, you know, you go back to the great Manchester United teams, the great Liverpool teams, they weren't taking a picture after a solitary victory and celebrating in that way. You've got to have this business type mentality where you win a game and then you go right on the next one, on the next one. And it's got to be the same level of intensity every game, which we have seen from Eddie Howe and his players in the past. But they just seem to have lost. That seems to have slipped away now, and they can't recover it. And that for me is a problem. Look, they'll go into the Fulham game. They'll probably win the Fulham game, and then they'll be back to, you know, celebrating and all that sort of stuff. But then when's the next Brentford? When's the next West Ham? When's the next Sunderland? Because it's got to be consistent, and I'm not seeing a consistent message, and we are far, far from world class as things stand.
Yeah, and just to wrap it up then, because you've summed it up perfectly there in terms of the frustration from today, and we've just spoken to Bruno in the mix zone, and there'll be quotes out there this week, and he, to be fair, really did show that frustration. He looked like he was really emotional and couldn't quite put his finger on what quite happened, but they do have the opportunity to respond against Fulham. It isn't quite the importance of today. Obviously, most fans would have preferred to win today going into that game, but that hasn't happened. But how important is it that they not only win that game to get into a semi-final again and just give themselves a bit more of a positive spirit, but they also go there and put in a positive performance? Because I think even if they win, but they don't play well, it doesn't bode well for them. Such a quick turnaround for the Chelsea game, pretty much just over 48 hours later. No,
it doesn't. And to be totally honest, I just hope there's no hangover from this game, and that is possible if Newcastle aren't careful. I'm not sure what else he does in terms of team selection, because he tried everything on there today and nothing worked. So, you know, Fulham at home is a completely different proposition to this, but a victory is much needed. But overall, if they don't get it, then they're going to get reminded of it. Every time they get beat now, they're going to get reminded of this. So there's a lot of work to do. So just to wrap up then, a pretty frustrating podcast. I hope that me and Lee venting our frustrations sort of help you guys sort of vent your frustrations, and on to Wednesday where Newcastle really need to respond with a win against Fulham. If they do so, they're in the Carabao Cup semi-final for the second season running, and that has to be the objective going forward now. But thanks for joining us. We wish it was a happier podcast. Shame it isn't, but we go again, and hopefully Newcastle can get back to winning ways on Wednesday.